Hi and welcome to Chord Piano. My name's Mark Deeks and this is the Level 1 two-hand chord exercise lesson. If you haven't already done so, now would be a good time to look at the beginner lessons where I showed you the first lesson in how to play a basic triad shape in the right hand. And then I introduce you to the idea of having to coordinate that with something else entirely different in the left hand, which was single notes. And then we turned it into some very basic sequences such as this one. So if you haven't already done so, pause this video and have a look at those beginner chord lessons before you go on with this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to extend that a little bit into using 8 different chords. And this is what's called diatonic harmony. That's an expression that you might hear some musicians refer to quite a lot. All it means is the harmony or the chords that belong to a certain musical key. Sometimes when you hear musicians refer to a musical key, if you don't know what that means, I would just advise you to insert the word language instead of key, and you might find that it starts to make a little bit more sense. And the notes that belong to that key, think of that as the alphabet of that key. So when we refer to a piece of written language being in the language of Spanish or in the language of French, it's the same kind of thing, because then what we're saying is in a piece of written words that's using the Spanish language, we would expect to see certain letters, i.e. from the Spanish alphabet or from the way Spanish people pronounce certain sounds. It's kind of the same thing in music in that a key, or a language, is a set of notes, i.e. an alphabet, so that these are the notes or the letters that we would expect to see within that key or within that language. So the exercises that we're doing here are all in the key of C major, the language of C major. And C major tends to be the key that piano players deal with first, because it just so happens, although this is purely coincidence, that all of the notes involved in the language of C major are the white notes on piano, so they're kind of easier to get used to first. But don't get the idea that somehow black notes are somehow different. They're not, they're just different pitches. They're just slightly further away. The ones that we tend to focus on first though for C major are the white notes. So we're going to focus on what I call the diatonic harmony of C major, which means the basic triads or the chords or the harmony that fits in with the language of C major. And so far we've played 5 of those chords, and you may have seen elsewhere on the Chords site that I've referred to these by name. I said some of the chords were called major chords, and they tend to be the happier sounding ones. Number 1, number 4 and number 5. And I name these chords based on the note that is at the lowest end of the chord. In this case, the C, so that's a C major chord, an F major chord, and a G major chord. Numbers 2, 3, and 6 are the minor chords. D minor, E minor, and A minor. So you should find that you can start to hear the similarity in terms of the character of the sound between numbers 1, 4 and 5. They tend to sound quite alike. And numbers 2, 3 and 6 should also sound similar to each other. They have a different character of sound to numbers 1, 4 and 5. The last one that we look at is number 7. I'll say that this is the last chord in the key. We tend to quite often when we're playing exercises or scales play number 8 as well. That's what we call the octave, because it's the same note as we've started on. So in this case, in the key of C major, or the language of C major, if I start on a C, I'm going to end on a C as well. These are an octave apart. But number 7, the one that we haven't looked at yet, is a little bit more of an unusual sounding chord. It's what's called a diminished chord. If I follow the law of the key completely, which is what diatonic harmony means, I'm following the law of the key, the law of this language. So if I play through all of the chords in this key, you should probably hear that number 7 sounds a little bit different. Sometimes people just refer to it as weird, or I don't like that one, or what's a bit strange, what's that? It's a different type of chord to the others that have come before. So we have this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a little bit of a different sounding chord. And play number 8, and it should be the same as your first chord, i.e. in this case, a chord of C major. That's called a diminished chord or a diminished triad. It's a little bit of an unusual sounding chord. It's not used as commonly as major and minor chords. So we've just extended the previous exercise, moving from one chord to the next or one triad to the next. And I'd also like you to get used to coming down as well. Again, making sure that all three notes are going down at the same time and making sure that it's a smaller movement to get from one chord to the next. Minimizing the movements is very important in order to try and pick up your speed later. Meanwhile, your left hand is going to extend what we did in the previous exercise where we only had 5 different notes in the left hand and 5 different chords in the right hand. And you're going to play what we call a full C major scale, which, as you may have seen elsewhere on the Chord Piano site, perhaps in the lesson called Moving Around the Keys, involves bringing fingers over the top of your thumb. We're trying to keep your hand as flat as possible. I'll show you that again. And when you're going back down, your thumb comes underneath the fingers. So we're going to try and combine that with the 8 chords in the right hand. And it should sound like this. Go back down as well. As I said to you on previous occasions, it's a great idea to try and get used to what it feels like to not have to look at something in order for it to be played right. It's very important that you break that hand-eye coordination bond that is so automatic in so many other things that we do in everyday life. So eventually you should get so you can play that full exercise but without looking at either hand. That's when you really know that you're going to start to have the confidence to be able to keep your eye on the music rather than needing to see every last thing that's happening on the piano. That'll probably take a little bit of practice at first. So this would be a good opportunity to pause the video, have a practice, take your time. Remember, speed isn't important right now, but good luck with that. It's an exciting stage to get through when you're starting to really get used to what it feels like playing with 2 hands. Good luck, and we'll see you again on Chord Piano.